Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of Modern Media Review. I'm Robin Gibson.
And I'm Sean Goligly.
And before we start this week's review, just like to say, if you enjoy the podcast, visit our YouTube channel, subscribe on YouTube if you like. You can also listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, and we've got a website, modernmediareview.com.
And we tweet, Robin, don't we?
We do tweet at review_modern, and we're even on Facebook if you like that sort of thing.
Isn't Facebook just for old people?
It is nowadays, yeah.
So if we were younger, what would we be on? Instagram?
There's not much point, as Instagram's not really for talking. It's a bit modern, a bit like what we're going to be talking about, which is a spate of reports in the media going one way and the other about the oncoming phenomenon of cashless society, cashless Britain. Reading in The Guardian, for example, the other day, people over 55, which seems to be the new benchmark for being old, is people over 55 are going to be left behind by banks and cashless society, and more than 8 million adults are going to struggle to cope, which sounds absolutely
ludicrous.
Like appalling catastrophe.
No, it's ludicrous. Robin, I lived in a cashless society for about maybe 10 years.
Really? Where?
And that was years ago.
What happened?
I went into any shop I wanted to and purchased goods, and no money exchanged hands at all. It was cashless.
When did this happen?
Well, I suppose I've got to admit it was probably with my mum and dad when I was a kid. But
when you were about 5.
Yeah, but it was a cashless society, you know.
For you it was, not for them, mate.
I guess they were paying, so maybe it wasn't.
Forking out for rally
chopper.
Yeah. Pick and mix and all that sort of thing. Hedgehog flavoured crisp.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, for
that's
me,
not what they're talking about.
Oh, then it's not so good then. I'm against it.
The problem is that I don't quite get this, because it's saying, I don't think over 55 really is that old. Surely people over 55 can use apps and stuff like that, but according to this, 3/4 of them said they never use mobile banking apps. But what are the banks going to do? I mean, the problem with these media reports is that the banks aren't quoted. They're not saying anything. It just says the banks are closing down their branches and their ATMs. No one from the banks come on to say these people better get their act together and use our apps.
Well, the whole point about it is it's a fallacy when the banks are saying, people aren't using banks. If you close them down fast enough because they are more profitable turning them into 4 flats in what used to be a local bank, that's a whole different argument.
Very nice Italian restaurant round the corner from here, isn't it?
Which used to be your local Midland.
It was a TSB, actually.
But that's the whole point. I mean, what they've discovered is that these properties are worth so much money that, if you just close them down and say no one's using the branches anymore, or you've got all these people turning up at 4 o'clock in the morning, mostly of a certain age, about 65, trying to cash their social security checks at 4 in the morning,
Well, my mum got a letter from her bank when they closed it down, giving all us details of the average footfall and 17.35 customers per working day. Didn't understand a word of it.
Well, yes.
Then they just shut down. But does that actually mean like these sort of horrible warnings are going to be true about the cash infrastructure being on the verge of collapse? You know what, actually, get off this track slightly. The way these reports are phrased are so full of jargon and unexplained stuff that you begin to question whether they're worth reading at all. This one says the country's cash infrastructure, in inverted commas, which whatever that is, what is that, wallets, which costs £5 billion a year to run.
In cash?
What does that mean?
Is that in cash?
What does that actually mean? Do they mean the cost of running cash machines or something like that?
I mean, I don't want to come across as some sort of terrible sort of conspiracy theorist, but for me, this whole idea about the cashless society, the same thing I think about mortgages is, the worst thing I ever did was take a mortgage out, because once you do that, you're finished. You're trapped into the whole thing, and you can't give up your job, and you can't go off to the Greek islands and do your Shirley Valentine thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, although I haven't actually done any Shirley Valentine things.
Well, I haven't either, but, that's the dream, Robin.
It's a very over 55 reference, that, Sean.
I guess, but as it is a cashless society, we're going to be in a cashless society over 55. I thought they might get this as they're tuning into our podcast.
I don't think it's the same as being trapped. I think it's different. I think the reason that I don't really like the cashless society, because it is convenient, just sort of waving your card around in the air in the general vicinity of a machine.
What, showing off your flash gold card?
Yes, but it's easy enough. But the truth is, and it's not an original thing to say, but it's worth saying, is that, you're being surveilled, you're being tracked everywhere you go and everything you do. Everyone knows exactly where you've been, where you've bought a pint, what you've spent your money on, where you spent it, when you spent it. That's all right as long as the financial institutions and the government are benign.
Well, Robin, you said this to me the other day. I said, I don't always walk home the same way. And you saying, oh, why is that? I said, well, because, if someone was tracking me and trying to, assassinate me.
Assassinations for important people. Who said this? You or me?
Me, I'm saying it. So I always change my route home just to be like that. And I don't like the idea of Oyster cards when they went out. I mean, I must admit, obviously, I went out and got one in the end. But I don't like the idea of being tracked. And this whole thing with your card is waving it about for a pint and all the rest of it is that, like you say, everyone knows where you're actually sitting at that moment. Never mind with your phone.
The Oyster card's actually quite good if, say, your house gets burgled and the robbers steal the card, and then they can be tracked.
Yeah, well, that's all well and good, but you remember when Bernie got robbed? They
that's
nicked
what
his
happened.
Oyster card. No, they never followed them.
Oh, did they not?
No, they didn't, no.
It might be like when my mate's stereo got nicked and the police lost the evidence. Maybe the coppers were using the Oyster cards themselves. You never get the full story with these coppers, do you?
Well, it always used to amuse me when you dropped, I don't know if you were a sort of good Samaritan, if someone dropped a wallet and you took it round to your local police station and said, oh, there was £20 in cash in there, by the way. And they always used to smile and say, oh, yes, and if it's not been reclaimed in 6 months, it'll be yours, laughing up their sleeves,
I used to have this colleague at work who was obsessed with it, and he was turning himself cashless, and I was very proud of the fact that he didn't have any cash. And maybe he's a bit like the guy we met behind the bar in the pub the other night, the guy when I handed him a tenner for 2 pints.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He looked at it weird,
scans.
didn't he?
He's scans.
He was sort of holding it in the air and he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Yeah. And the bar manager sort of gestured towards the till and said it's got to go in
there. It was almost like when you come back from Scotland and you've got Scottish £10 notes and they wonder if that's legal tender.
That was in the news today, actually. It must be something to do with Brexit and the general poisonous atmosphere that's around, because apparently there's been many more, English traders refusing to take Scottish money. I always find bookmakers are perfectly happy to accept it, so if you want to get rid of it, that's the way to go. Bookmakers,
I think, would take anyone's money. And talk about cashless society. What the hell are the bookmakers going to do if we do go cashless? Because those casino machines, as far as I can see, are drug laundering machines.
Well, not drug laundering.
No, drug money laundering.
You don't need to launder drugs, mate. Just drug. Well, yeah, because you see guys in there in London playing, 4 machines at one time and telling other prospective gamblers to get lost.
I want to have my £1 on the casino machine, and they're feeding it thousands every minute.
No, so I suspect that some of this alarm about the cashless society is simply being spread by the people who run the cash machines.
But the other thing is, what about, say, your local big issue seller?
Well, we know that.
Are they going to swipe you?
They're sort of doing contactless.
You're joking?
No, they have, yeah. The big issue itself has pushed this because people didn't have any cash to buy the big issue, and they were saying, oh, I'm sorry, I can't buy it. It sounds a poor excuse to me, but nevertheless. The other thing is that most big issue sellers I know don't actually sell the big issue. They just hold a copy while people give them money.
Yeah.
I never see a copy of the big issue changing hands.
Hold on a minute, you sound a bit like the Daily Mail here, mate. Every single person who's a beggar is earning about £45,000 a week.
No, I'm just saying a lot of them don't actually sell it. They just hold it and people give them cash anyway. That's all right, I don't mind that. Anyway, the point is that the big issue itself has been sort of pushing out the idea after a few sort of entrepreneurial vendors invested in their own card readers.
Okay.
No, honestly, there's an article in the Express with a guy in Bristol This guy's called Robin Fabian, and he sells a big issue in Bristol, and he was finding people didn't have any dough, so he bought himself a contactless card reader.
No way.
And he said it paid for itself in the first day. He said he sold 200 extra copies.
No way.
Plus, this is great because he is entrepreneurial, because he goes, I think I'm the only vendor in the area who has one, which gives me a bit of an edge over the others.
Well, that is entrepreneurial. And
it's a competitive market.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, you've got no excuse either, have you? When you go past and go, if they just brushed against you, they could read the card for 20 quid or whatever.
Ah, well, you see, talking about just brushing against you. Now, this may be apocryphal, but I've got a friend who's quite up on
This is an urban myth.
It's always made me very suspicious of even having a contactless card. My mate, who's quite into the sort of tech world, said to me that someone he knew had got one of these card readers, right? And put it under his coat and was just going around festivals. You know, at Glastonbury or something, beeping people for $2.99 and stuff like that, right? And he said it works like a dream, because when they get home from the festival, you know, they're like, what's this, $2.99? Did I buy a burger or something? They've got no idea.
Well, that was weird today, because I was going through my bank statement online, which is very rare for me. I like to have it in paper. And there was this thing for 40 quid, and it had some reference to it. And I thought it flagged something up. Do you know what I mean? It could have been one of those embarrassing late night purchases.
A cashless transaction.
A cashless transaction, yeah. But you're right. If it was a fiver, you don't even look at it. Do you know what I mean?
That's the whole point. So you could be being ripped off all the time. Although I think it was a good idea to do it at Glastonbury or something like that, where the customer, so if you could call them a customer, the victim's kind of off the face probably and is just not going to remember most of what happened.
Well, I think that the opposite of that was Sting, when he famously got ripped off for £7 million and said, it was just one of those things I didn't notice at the time.
What happened?
One of his business managers somehow ripped him off for £7 million. And when he was going, you know, when you're doing your cash point and it goes cash or balance, yeah? Well, I think Sting must have been doing cash for a lot of the time, yeah? And then one morning he did cash and balance, and it seemed maybe a little bit lower than he thought. Didn't give it much thought, but then went back a couple of weeks later and noticed he was £7 million lighter.
I don't think people at Sting, right, are going to be troubled by the cashless society.
Well, he was probably too busy having tantric sex for about 3 months.
Well, maybe that he pays for that. Maybe he's not telling.
Maybe that
the
costs
whole
£7
story.
million, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's a long session, isn't it? You never see people at Sting at the cash point, do you?
No.
Have you ever encountered even a minor celebrity at a cash point?
Well, isn't it like if you're a big celebrity, say like Sting, that you don't actually have to spend anything?
Yeah, he lives in his own cashless society, doesn't he?
Exactly, like I did when I was with my mum and dad.
Yeah.
But he's doing it for real.
But who do you think buys things for Sting? I know he's probably got people to feed him and all that, because he's like forgotten how to use cutlery. But who do you think actually buys his stuff? Do you think someone just brings it around and he says, I'll have that and take that back?
Well, it's got to be a little bit like Alan Partridge's PA, hasn't it? He's probably got several of them following him round, you know?
I always think, you know, if you were Sting, like, the idea of choosing a specific pair of shoes, you'd be sort of...
Too
feel
boring.
Above that, wouldn't
Yeah, exactly.
you?
To be too boring. I mean, why
They should just materialise, you know?
Yeah, I've got better things to do, you know. I'm thinking about the Dalai Lama and tantric sex and various other things. And...
Well, you seem a bit obsessed with this tantric sex.
Well, I was a bit... I read about it in Viz, you know. And it's always...
They do cover Sting very thoroughly in Viz. It's another interesting thing about pop stars, because we're saying Sting probably doesn't use any cash, but I've been reading about Ed Sheeran's controversial pond. Have you read about the controversial pond?
Yeah, it does sound a bit like a swimming pool, Robin.
I wonder how much cash he's having to knock out to get this stuff knocked up round his house, you know. He's got a pond at his home, which is meant to be sort of...
well, it's not a pond, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a wildlife pond, mate.
No, isn't he just applying for planning permission?
No, he's got the pond, mate.
Okay.
But now photographs have emerged, but it's meant to be for wildlife, you know, like...
Greater crested newts.
Exactly, actually, which we'll get onto in a minute. But some newspapers found some photographs, which they may well have taken themselves thinking about it. And it showed some steps into the pond, a handrail and a little jetty. But I don't see
that
why
sounds like a swimming pool.
Yeah, say that, but what about emergency access and just generally making the thing look nicer, you know?
So you mean you need emergency access into a swimming pool?
A wildlife pond.
Yeah, I found myself needing emergency access into a wildlife pond. It's not really. He was trying to get round the whole thing, wasn't he?
Well, the council say there's no evidence it's not a wildlife pond. He's got all sorts of problems with wildlife, actually, because he was trying to build a Saxon-style chapel.
I did read about that.
A Saxon-style chapel? What would that look like? Is it... What Saxon building is made of mud or something? Why is he building a chapel anyway? Anyway, there was going to be a negative impact on great crested newts.
Yes.
So he had to shelf his chapel plans.
Well, I was down the pub the other night, and we were talking about impacts on great crested newts, and someone did mention Ed Sheeran's, great ability to propagate them.
You can't imagine getting all that built and paying for it with a debit card, can you?
No. Whereas
I think you'd have to say, I want a little jetty here, mate. Will you do it for cash?
Basically, if you'd gone round to the pub as Ed Sheeran and said to your local builder whilst in the pub, I'll knock you a bit of cash, can you build me a swimming pool? I won't have to go through planning. It would have been sorted much quicker.
Ed Sheeran strikes me as that kind of guy. He's very down to earth.
He is, yeah.
I bet he's got a load of cash on him all the time. He pays for everything in cash, new guitar strings.
Absolutely. And there is also a wonderful feeling about having the real thing in your hands, because otherwise you can go a bit mental. I don't know about you, Robin, but I never went to a restaurant before I was about 18, I don't think.
Did you not go with your mum and dad and they paid for everything?
Well, that was down to the sort of like sweet shop. But no, we didn't do a lot of restaurants. Maybe once a year when we were going on holiday. When you went to a restaurant with a card for the first time, when you got your first credit card, oh my God, you'd spend a fortune on, chicken tikka masala and, 4 more pints of lager. And all of a sudden you'd overspent massively and you were broke.
That's why the banks like the cashless society, because people don't realise what they're laying out,
Well, put it this way, Robin, when you're buying something in a shop and you're looking at a shirt and you go, oh, that's not too bad. Yeah, I'd buy that for a tenner. When it's on there for 60 quid, there's no chance you'd fork out 60 quid out of your pocket. But if it's on a cashless society type thing, you just might do.
That's exactly it. So there's a map. Actually, the Express has been good enough to provide an interactive map of the top. No, it's very good, but it's not theirs. It's from some company called Payment Sense, who could be advocates for cardless payment.
Yeah,
going
possibly.
by the blurb on this map, I think maybe they are. And the top place, going back to that big issue seller who'd bought his own card reader, the top place in Britain for cashless payment is Bristol.
Now, how is that? What's that all about?
Oh, actually, no, London's number 1. Bristol's number 3, sorry.
If you were sort of like wandering about on a day out and you were, you'd gone in to buy a shirt for 60 quid, and because it was 60 quid and not in cash, you did it on your card, and you're wandering home thinking, oh, I've had a great day. I fancy doing some crack cocaine. Can you do that cashless?
It's possible.
Well, I'm just wondering. Maybe you've got an entrepreneurial dealer,
I'm not saying it's possible, but it's possible that it's possible without a doubt. I mean, these guys are selling to middle, as Cressida Dick's always telling us, the whole drug problem's entirely down to middle-class dinner party goers, isn't it? I'm quite happy to blame them, actually. Middle-class dinner party goers don't get enough blame for stuff, do they?
Absolutely.
The more stuff you can pin on them, the better. I think we need to start thinking about more ways to pin the blame on dinner party goers.
Middle class dinner party goers.
They've been remarkably blameless for ages, and I don't like to side with the coppers, but it's good of Cressida Dick to stick something on them.
Well, I think there was a big blow up around my area the other day with some middle class dinner party goers. Is that there was a huge knife crime incident. And I think somebody had sort of like messed up the quinoa. It all kicked off and everyone took their blades out.
Anyway, on the map, just a little bit of media interlude here. Is whoever's compiled this has done it in this. When you get these half-hearted things where people just write a load of boring stuff and then you have like one funny idea.
Yeah.
So say it says Birmingham number 2, the UK's second most populous city, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that's interesting. So Birmingham still is Britain's second city?
Yeah, it is, yes. But there's no pun or joke in the blurb because they haven't thought of one about Birmingham.
Okay.
But then in Sheffield it says, the city has to steal itself as it's fallen back to...
Oh.
You can't do that unless you do it in every entry, can you? You can't have number 8 with a pun and number 2 without a pun.
Also, Robin, it's one of these things where if you're of a certain age and you're a sub-editor, say, for instance, your cultural references age with you, because when was the last time Sheffield was a steel city?
I know, but they've gone a bit up to date with Manchester, because it says, we are not twisting your melon when we say Manchester is in the top 5.
But that's like...
that's 30 years out of date as well.
Well, exactly.
Isn't it?
I remember when I was working, took one of the young lads out to the pub. He'd worked his first day. And he said to me, what sort of music do you like? And I said, well, my taste's a little bit older. And he said, what about the modern stuff? And I said, well, I quite like Blur and Oasis, So,
they're not current, Sean, I'm sorry to tell you.
well, exactly. That was 20 years out of date then.
The good thing about all this is that I found the other day when I was researching this, and this is better than the Daily Mail or the Express, this is on the Mashable UK, which is a sort of quite up-to-date tech website, that there's a massive backlash about this cashless thing in America, and seeing as we copy America with everything else, don't we? I mean, we very much cleave to America and reject Europe, which is why we're leaving Europe, or trying to leave Europe. In America, cities are getting fed up with this and have actually decided that it's not fair to be cashless. There's a survey here by the FDIC. Do you know who they are?
No.
I don't know what they are either, but they sound quite important. Anyway, they reckon that these are some good new words here, 25% of American households are either unbanked, which means they've not got a bank account, or underbanked, which means they have got bank accounts but rely heavily on other sources of money. And they've realised the bleeding obvious that it's not really fair and that cashless stores disproportionate. I mean, but I've seen cashless places down here.
But here's the difference, is that my local chippy is cash only.
Oh, you get some cash-only places as well, but then people really get the hump about that now because they expect... I don't mind these card things if they work. It's when you're in the pub, right, and it's people paying with the cards. Instead of just sort of wafting it around, they have to stick it in the thing, put their pin in. The bloke's got to put... They've always got to put a new roll in when it's the guy who's been served before you, don't they? And then they've got to let it spin out, and then they've got to hand it back with the card.
Which really annoys me, because I've got cash. I'm ready to go. I'm fast to go. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's much, much slower. But anyway, apparently cashless stores have become a problem in America.
Wait,
Somebody here's really thought it through very thoroughly, because they're saying that apart from excluding marginalised communities, they're saying it could also be a problem for people in abusive relationships with shared bank accounts, which no one's thought of, have they?
Well, yeah, that's
very profound thinking there.
It's...
People who started this cashless thing in America was Amazon with their Go stores. Have you read about the Go stores?
Yeah, but Robin, isn't this just like the same people that, and this is very sort of California, San Francisco, is that, we're now using cash because no one else is. The same reason that I go out and buy a vinyl, 12-inch vinyl.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole story here is that Amazon have set up these Amazon Go stores, which you just walk in and pick stuff up and walk out, right?
Okay.
Which sounds great.
Is that cashless? I like that sort of cashless society.
You don't even need your mum and dad with you. Anyway, all you need, it's one of those classic things that says all you need is a 32-bit ZR7 responder.
Okay, that's
Amazon.
That's me screwed.
All you need is an Amazon account, the free Amazon Go app, and a recent generation iPhone or Android. That's all you need, and then it's all as easy as pie. So once you've got all that, you walk in, pick the stuff up, and it can tell if you've picked it up or you've put it back down, if you've had a little feel of it and decided you don't like it. It's only food and groceries and stuff. You can't go in there and buy a telly or something.
Well, all this stuff is brilliant, apart from the fact that I went pretty retro a couple of years ago and got myself a dial-up phone, yeah?
Why?
Well, I loved the look of it, and it reminded me of, being a kid.
Have you actually done it, though? It's so tedious.
Oh, man, it's not just tedious, it's totally unworkable, because you can't phone anyone anymore without having a keypad.
Can't you?
No. So anytime you phone up, you sort of like, I don't know, like the water bill or your electricity or anything, they say, tap 1 for this, tap 2 for this, 4 to go back, 5 to rehear the menu. Yeah,
and it doesn't work if you dial 4.
No. So there's me with my dial-up doing absolutely nothing. And the last virtual message was, you are obviously a moron, you need to hang up.
We can't deal with your query. Goodbye. Anyway, get back to the point about Amazon Go here, right? The whole point about their stores was that they were cashless, and they had one of these infantile sort of blurbs announcing how great it was, saying, wow, wouldn't it be great? We asked ourselves, what if we could create a shopping experience with no lines, that's queues, and no checkout? Could we push the boundaries of blah, blah, blah? So, they've done all that. and then they've decided to start accepting cash.
Well, cash is the new credit.
Yes, it said, I love this. The companies, you might be right about them thinking it's sort of a bit hip, you know.
Do you know what I mean? You'll have loads of bearded lads in flannel shirts with their beards and their big sensible walking shoes going, yeah, I only use cash.
Yes, the company's senior vice president of physical stores has told employees that they'll start accepting alternative payment methods.
Like cash.
Which is cash. We're going to go around in a circle here.
Yeah.
There's an interesting novel by Lionel Shriver, who's probably best known for We Need to Talk About Kevin. Came out a couple of years ago, called The Mandibles, which is kind of a good warning about this sort of thing, because it's set a few decades in the future, and instead of the usual environmental or nuclear disaster resulting in a dystopia, some kind of undefined internet stroke banking catastrophe has resulted in a horrendous dystopia, and everyone's got a chip in the back of their neck which does everything for them. So you know, it's a bit like an Alexa in your head, and it does all your transactions, and it's all very scary. And we're not far away from that with when you see people pull out their phone in the pub or the shop and wave it at the till and get into the tube through the barrier with their phone. You think every single thing they're doing has been tracked on their phone.
Absolutely.
It's only the pocket's only one step away from being wired into you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
I don't think anyone actually wants it. I don't think people really know what they've been led into here, and I think people are beginning to wise up. And I mean, in the Mail, the article in the Mail, it says 6 out of 10 transactions are now contactless or something, and it was 5 years ago. I mean, this is all a bit. There's a lot of disparate numbers here, and you know, I just think it's a load of bollocks, really. I mean, people have been saying people keep saying newspapers are going to go out of business. So it's slowly declining, but people who were predicting they'd be gone by now, and they're not.
What I think's going to happen, Robin, is that in 10 years' time, we're going to have everyone reading newspapers. Everyone's going to be paying for everything in cash and reading books and papers on the tube rather than looking at phones. I forgot to tell you, I went down to the supermarket. I finally cashed up my coin jars.
Oh, yeah. They've got big machines down there, haven't they, where you can...
Yeah, they take 11% off you, the thieving bastards.
What?
Yeah, 11%.
I thought it was just a straight exchange.
No, they take 11%.
What supermarket was this?
Sainsbury's.
11%?
Yeah.
That's a national scandal.
That is a national scandal. It's almost like sort of Ocean Finance or...
So you only came out of there with 89p? That's outrageous.
Yeah, there you go. I was cashless when I came out of Sainsbury's.
I didn't know you were so thrifty, Sean.
Well, it's just me, Robin.
I just throw away 1p's and 2p's.
Well, I normally throw away any cash in my pocket at all. That's how I'm cashless.
Well, okay, well, you're cashless at the moment.
Yeah,
you're cashless by accident and not by design.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we'll wrap up the cashless society.
Definitely.
We'll say thanks for listening.
Yes, if you're still here.
And we'll be back next week with another podcast talking about something else.
We're going to be card reading. We're going to be card reading after this.
I don't think we're going to return to this topic. Get a fresh topic for next week. And on that note of indecision, just time to say thanks for listening and good night.
Cheers, all the best.
Bye.